everybody, Dave with Wags Automotive here in beautiful BFM, and I got a little thing here I want to show you guys that I've never seen before, and I've been doing a lot of reading on the internet about this, and I think it's probably a big problem, but I don't know. I hope this helps somebody. But to make a long story short, I just spent $400 to buy parts for a problem I have with this RV that cost me $2.50 to fix. And let me show you what's going on here. Well, let me tell you what's going on. So I'm going to tell you first, okay? So this is my beautiful, gorgeous 1995 Itasca that I bought for $100 a few years ago. And I was going to take it to the No Name Nationals in a couple weeks. And so I got it out the other day. It had been sitting for a while. And I decided, I probably ought to clean this thing up and make it look halfway decent. So I pulled it up here in front of my house. Spent all day long cleaning it inside, making it look good. And that night I wanted to start it up and move it. And I turned the key to start it. It would crank, but it wouldn't start. And I know what's going on. And so first thing I think of is, well, maybe the fuel pump's out of it. Maybe it's not getting fuel. So, and the easiest way, if you guys know anything about cars, the easiest way on a fuel injected car to find out whether it's getting fuel or not, or even a carbureted car, the easiest way to find out whether it's getting fuel or not is to take the air cleaner off, spray a little brake clean that's flammable or carburetor cleaner or something down the intake, and if it fires up, then you know it's getting spark, but it's not getting fuel, especially if it dies when you stop spraying whatever you're spraying into it. And that's what I did, and it fired up. I'm like, okay, so I got a fuel problem. So I called the parts store, local parts store, and I said, hey, can you get me a fuel pump? And they said, yeah, we can have one tomorrow. I said, cool, order it. I'll just put it in. Well, this RV has a 70-gallon tank on it. It's huge. And it's a nightmare to get it off. So anyhow, the next morning, I go to the parts store. I get the fuel pump. I bring it home. I pull the tank down, pull the fuel pump out, and I think, maybe I should bench test this old fuel pump to see what's going on with it. And so I get a battery out and some jumpers, and I jumper it, and it runs. And I'm like, well, that's weird. It's not getting fuel to the engine, but the fuel pump's working. So what's going on here? So then I start doing a little bit of research on the internet. And this, by the way, this thing is a 7.4 liter 454 TBI injected. It's got an ECM. It's got a map sensor. It's got a throttle position sensor. It's got electronic ignition. It's got throttle body injection. It's got a fuel pump in the tank. And most fuel injection systems that are TBI, they put out about 9, 10, 12 pounds of pressure. Well, the big blocks put out about 30. So it's a heavier pump in the tank. Okay? So I'm doing all this research online, trying to figure out what's going on. And man, I'm telling you, when you Google TBI engines that you're getting, and I knew I was getting fire. I knew I was getting fire because I spray something down the throttle body and it starts. So, and I got my little spark checker tool out. Where's it at? Oh, it's right here. I got my little spark checker tool out, and I put another spark plug wire, and sure enough, it would bing, 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 bing flash whenever I tried to crank it, but it wouldn't start. Well, so I knew it had spark. So I'm like, okay, so I need to do some research on this thing. So I'm doing research on it, and I guess apparently this problem happens a lot with people. And oh, by the way, stick this out till the end, because you're probably going to laugh at me when you see what happens when this is over with. But it happens a lot with me. But anyhow, so I'm doing some research, and there's everything from, oh, it's your map sensor. You should unplug your throttle position sensor, because if it's sending a rich signal to the ECM, then it won't fire the injectors, and if you unplug it, then it fires the injectors, because it doesn't see the map or the throttle position sensor signal anymore. So it doesn't think, if the throttle position sensor goes bad, I guess it thinks it's at watt, which is wide open throttle, and so it turns the injectors off because it thinks it's floored, and it doesn't need any more fuel, so it turns the injectors off, which doesn't make sense to me, because if it's floored, it would need all the fuel it could get. But anyhow, that's what they were saying. So I proceed to unplug the throttle position sensor. Nothing happens. I proceed to mess with all the other stuff that I can try to figure out. Nothing happens. And then they say, well, check the people online were saying, well, check the fuel pump relay. And then other guys said, there is not a fuel pump relay on a 95. There's not a relay on it. The computer tells the fuel pump when to turn on. Okay, so there's not a fuel pump relay. So I don't know if there is or not. So anyhow, I decide, and another thing is they said the oil pressure sending unit could be bad because if the ECM doesn't see oil pressure, then it shuts off the fuel because it thinks the engine's got no oil pressure. I'm like, okay. So I call the parts store back and I'm like, hey, you got a fuel pump relay? And they're like, yeah, we got that in stock. I'm like, you got a oil pressure sending unit? They got, yeah, they got that in stock. Okay, well, hold those for me. I'm going to check a few things more here. So anyhow, I decided, which may be a good idea, maybe not. I already had a new fuel pump, but the old one bench tested and worked. I didn't pressure test it, and I should have, but I didn't. And I thought, well, I'm just going to put the old fuel pump back in it because I know it works. So I'm assuming that's not the problem. So I put the old fuel pump back in it, still wouldn't start. So then I go to town and I get the fuel pump relay, which if I think about it, I didn't need because the fuel pump's coming on. It's just not working properly. So, or it's not firing the injectors. So, but anyhow, I got the fuel pump relay. I got a new oil pressure sending unit. I come back here. I proceed to pull off the old fuel pump relay, which, by the way, it does have one. And if you want to know where it's at, it's under the doghouse, which is the piece that comes off, the cover that goes over the engine. You take that off, and you look up inside on the left side, up by the air conditioning compressor. It's mounted to the firewall up in there. So it's not mounted to the front, facing forward. It's mounted facing the engine. So you got to look up in there where the doghouse curves down. That's where it's at on the left side. Okay, so it does have a fuel pump relay because it's there. So I replaced that. Still didn't start. So I thought, well, I got a $10, $12 oil pressure sending unit here. I'll just go ahead and put that on. So I pulled the old one off, put that on. I didn't do anything either. I'm like, okay, this is crazy. So I thought, well, maybe the ECM's bad. Maybe I got a bad ECM. So I called the parts store. I wanted to get them called before they closed. I'm like, hey, you guys got an ECM? And they said, no, but we can get one. We have one for you here tomorrow. And I said, well, how much is it? They said $110. I'm like, well, that's pretty cheap for an ECM. I'm surprised it's that cheap, but go ahead and order it for me. I don't know if I'm going to need it or not, but go ahead and order it, okay? So I go to the parts store. I get the new fuel pump back again, okay? Well, this was last night. It was 10 o'clock at night. I was done. So then first thing this morning, I get up and I think, you know, maybe that fuel pump, I didn't pressure test it, so maybe it has pressure, but not enough. Maybe it's weak. So I go back to the parts store this morning. I get the new fuel pump again, which is $100. And of course, when you buy the fuel pump, you got to buy the fuel pump and you got to buy the sock because they won't guarantee the fuel pump if you don't buy the sock. The sock's an extra $12, which they could put the sock on the fuel pump, but they don't want to do that. You know, they want to charge an extra $12, whatever. So now I've got a brand new $100 fuel pump on it with a sock. I've got a fuel pump regulator, or not fuel pump, not regulator, but a fuel pump relay. I've got a new one of them on it. I've got a new oil pressure sending unit. Okay, so I'm thinking, okay, now it's surely going to start. So put all that on there, put the new fuel pump in, hook everything up, put gas back in the tank, crank it over, still won't start. And I'm like, man, you got to be kidding me. This is crazy. Well, they had gotten in the ECM overnight. So I thought, well, I really don't want to spend $100 on an ECM, but I don't know what else it could be. I mean, I've replaced literally everything on the fuel system. And I got spark, and oh, and by the way, when I put the new fuel pump on, I remembered I had a fuel pressure test system in the kit in my shop, so I went and got that, took the fuel filter out. On these, you got to take the fuel filter out, and you got this little manifold that goes in place with the fuel filter, and it's got a Schrader valve on it, and you plug that in, and you know, you can check your fuel pressure that way. So I did all that, cranked it over, 30 pounds of fuel pressure. I got plenty of fuel pressure, no problem. That's not the problem. I got fuel pressure. So I got fuel pressure, I got spark, but the injectors aren't firing. What is going on here? So I'm thinking, okay, well, it has to be the computer, because the computer is what reads everything else and tells the injectors when to fire. So I'm like, well, I guess I got to go to town. I got to spend another $100 buying a computer. Well, I go to town, and the computer isn't $100. It's $165 because I got to pay a $45 core, and I'm not sure if my computer's bad, so I don't want to give him my old computer that may or may not be bad, but I'm thinking it probably is. But I thought, I'll just buy the thing, pay the core. If I put it in and it works, then I'll just take my old one back and get my core money back. No big deal. I'll do that. They're closed. Obviously, they close at noon. Today's Saturday. They close at noon. So I said, I'll just take it back, buddy, and I'll get my $45 core fee back. No big deal, right? So I proceed to come back home, pull the computer, disconnect the battery, make sure everything's, dead. Don't want any sparks anywhere. Don't want to blow anything up. Pull the old computer out. Pull the PROM out. If you know what a PROM is, it's programmable read-only memory. It's a chip that goes inside these older cars. It's actually a chip you got to pull out, and it's specific to each vehicle. So you pull it out and you put it in the new computer, and that way the new computer knows what parameters to follow when it's in the car, because that computer fits a multitude of cars, but the little chip is what tells it what car it's in and what parameters it needs to follow. Okay? So I pull the PROM out. Of course, you got to be really careful getting the PROM out. You don't want to bend it or break it or anything like that. So I pull it out, put it in the new computer, put it in, and then I thought, well, I don't think it's going to hurt anything. Well, I know it's not going to hurt anything. I'm going to run a ground wire from the